wetlands, but groundwater wetlands are actually pretty easy because the water's at the ground level. It's been usually you'll find that probably it's been grazed with stock for years and pugged and that kind of thing. It just needs some excavation out, or it's been flattened at one time. But this is what we're looking for: water at or near the ground. Just really quickly, if it's not near the ground, we put a dam in, but we put a dam in underground. So if your water's flowing this way, your groundwater's down here flowing this way, it hits that impermeable clay layer, it'll go up. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, it'll work its way up. And I've personally pulled water from 1.5 meters down up to fill my wetlands. And one of these wetlands will show as we go. But it's the same procedure as we did for the surface water wetland, basically. Go down to that impermeable surface. You can't see it, but that water is slowly leaking into there. This one we're making it wide because we're going to track wide it, but we're going to track pump it. This is a great impermeable clay, amazing stuff. It's really hard to dig out, and but once you get down that layer, you know you're good, and it's covering, but you're starting to get water coming in already, and that really tells me when I got water flushing, I'm pretty good for groundwater. Again, we're filling it in with the clay. Basically, what's happening is he's pushing in and compacting, and the digger operator is actually bringing some clay in for this end when he runs out of clay to compact as he pushes it in. So it was really nice to have two there because you do things at a quicker rate, and when you're using machine tracking to compact, it's really good to have that dozer there. Next one. We create the bowl. And in big spaces, the dozer works really great. In smaller spaces, the digger is actually a little bit better for it. Go to the next slide. Again, working in concert, he's still compacting, he's excavating the bowl, but when he's pulling clay from that bowl, he's just putting it down for the dozer to spread and compact into the groundwater dam. And then we spread again with topsoil and add the topography. And basically we use whatever we find on site. If we dig up old stumps, we use that. If there's a tree that we can pull down, especially if it's a tree that the farmer doesn't want, we'll pull that down. Next slide. And that's our finished product. So this wetland here, the water table was, this was actually done with funding from Frontier up in Northland. It was one of the Doc Living Waters first projects we did. The water table was about 1.5 meters down. There was a road back around here, so we had a small catchment the size of this room, and we thought, well, we're not going to get a lot of surface water in there, but we do get a little bit of runoff off that paddock. But it wouldn't have been enough to keep those wetlands wet. We wanted them wet, so I put that groundwater dam in. We had a drought that summer. That one kept flowing over the spillway all summer while all the farm ponds dried up. This one stayed that level all summer long because the groundwater just kept feeding it. It's a small one. If you get a big one and you're depending on bringing groundwater up, you got to have really good groundwater flow. But these small ones, it's actually a really neat way.
I think if I could ask a real weird question.
Yep. There's no weird questions.
It's about mosquitoes.
Yep.
We're in an area of what we call rural residential.
Yep.
And we want to build.
Yep.
Big wetlands. The mosquito question is going to come around.
Yep. And it's a question that's always asked.
Oh,
This little wetland here has no mosquitoes. Well, it does have mosquitoes in there in larvae form, but it's filled with dragonfly larvae. And when you've got a functioning wetland, you've got dragonfly, damselflies, and all these predators. Dragonfly larvae and damselfly larvae are almost mosquito larvae specialist predators. They'll take other bugs, but most of their diet is mosquito larvae.
So you're helping the problem.
That's right. Yeah. So you're going to have more problems in an urban rural area with your flower pots with water sitting in the base of them than you will a functioning wetland. Actually, right down from here was an old bathtub that was filled with water. It was just loaded with mosquitoes. Interestingly, this one, 4 weeks later, after this filled up, it already had dragonfly larvae in and damselfly larvae swimming around in it, and water boat, and within, it's like, where'd they come from? They find these things really quickly. There's no connectivity. Yep. Yep.
We're currently quarrying out an area, about 8 hectares.
Yep.
We have a resource consent, and we are converting it, before we should go, we're converting it into a wetland.
Yep.
Highly constructed, obviously, to take the material out.
Yeah. Yep.
It is groundwater.
Yep.
2 sections of it are already filled, it's about 7 to 10 meters.
Yep.
And the ground is available for duck hunting.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Okay, so looking at the guys, the contractors have put the topsoil to the side, and obviously we're saying putting the topsoil in.
Yep.
It's not here. Putting it into the areas that are filled already.
Yep.
Would that ignite
I would do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Either that, or I would put in, as Craig and I were discussing the other day, in some of that, straw.
On
So-
the, in the base,
Yep.
even though it's full of water.
Yep.
How much? How long?
Yeah. How long is this piece of string? Actually, like if you're putting straw in, because what the topsoil uses that organic material for the insects. So that straw will break down eventually and provide that organic stuff. It's just speeding up that process. Eventually, you'll have reeds, they come in and they die, and they'll settle on the bottom. So it's just speeding that up for the insects. Yeah, I don't know. I just use whatever's available. And like if I was covering it with straw, I'd probably put enough straw in. Of course, it floats, so you're gonna have to soak it and stuff. But I'd probably get in that you get most of the gravel covered with straw to create that organic layer. On the other hand, if you want to keep some areas open without invasion of ralpo and that kind of thing, you might not want to put any organic stuff in that area. And I do that. I'll show you when I talk about microtopography. I do that if I'm creating shorebird foraging areas. I'll scrape down to that clay layer, and it's really shallow, but I don't want anything growing there right away, so I can keep it open for shorebirds. So I don't put any topsoil across that. I get a little cloudiness there, but in the greater state of the whole thing, it's not that much. It's diluted. So yeah, Lawson's done an excellent job on the one that we were at the other day. It looks really nice. So yeah, have a chat. Well, I'm sure you're talking to Lawson and Reese about that anyways.
Can I just ask a quick clarification question?
Yep.
So the difference between the ephemeral wetland and the groundwater wetland in terms of the way you treat them is just around the dam, the flood, is it? Because
Well,
everything
actually,
else seems to
I
be
use
the
this
same.
on these. I use the same technique.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just the ephemeral one, which is this one here, starting to fill. We had a little bit of rain that day. The ephemeral one has no ground. There's no groundwater that we can pick up to fill in.
So why the differentiation in construction?
We're going to get to that in the next one. But I just wanted to show you that actually, if your groundwater is deeper than just at the surface, we can lift that up and use that groundwater to create the wetlands. Most of the times when your water's at the surface, we'll go with this one. This is one where we got groundwater at the surface. We marked out what we wanted excavated, what we did. Again, I use different color tape for the digger operator. And chat with the digger operator. Always, he's #1 guy. He knows what's going on. You rely on him. When you want something done, you have those chats with him because he's done that work. He's an expert, so you rely on him. I'm the expert on how to design them and how to build them. He's the expert in actually using the equipment and how to get the compaction. So if I go to the digger operator and say, hey, I want to put a groundwater dam here, he's like, oh, I don't think it's this. We'll have that discussion. And most times, they know the area really well because they work in those areas. So I rely on them for a lot of things, or I can't do that because of these limitations. And then you got to work around them. But conversation with the digger operator is really good. Remember though, that as long as that digger's running, you're paying a bill. So if you're sitting there chatting with them and is running, you're paying that bill. So you keep those conversations, have those conversations a lot of times right before you start, and then as you go on. And then we just excavate, because basically that water's there, we're just gonna excavate soils and open up that water that's right there at ground level. Simple. Laser level is your friend, because that's where you're gonna decide your depth. We know where the groundwater level is. If we want a deep hole, we get the laser level and we run that, it shows how deep we need to fill those holes. Before we used to have these dumping levels, which required two. Now the laser level is just one person, you run around. The digger operators are operating, and I'm just going back and measuring while he's operating. And I'll say, hey, I want it about this much deeper. You know, I just give him a hint, and I want this much deeper, you know, and he just goes and does it. And then again, landscaping, you know, no wetland it doesn't have is flat. This is a peat wetland that there's been graves, there's been drains, and we got the water level back up. We're adjusting the water level with the pumping, so we changed the level where they pump to. So we allowed that water level to get up. So there was a little bit of management decision there. Interesting, these little scrapes and stuff we did are incredible bittern habitats, Kaituna, by the way. If anybody knows Kaituna up there.
Wait, which
yeah.
Kaitunas? Quite a few Kaitunas around.
And very plenty.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's dairy farm that's the regional council spot to convert back into wetlands as part of the new highway system as mitigation for that. So bittern and spotless crates, we're using these scrapes within months of them being put in. Okay. And success, you know, it's always good to see water and see what your end product is. I work with private landowners mostly, so a lot of times I'll get it done and I might never see that wetland again, you know, because I just don't have time to go visit these. Now that I have a drone technology, if I'm driving by, I just call a landowner up and I can send the drone in real quick. And it takes less time for me to send the drone in and take a photograph of it than me to walk in or drive into it. So I'm trying to use the new drone technology to monitor these wetlands, but sometimes I just never get to them. Other times I'll get calls and from guys that are very happy. I've never had anybody complain yet, knock on wood. So again, go back one. That's what it looks like, you know, within hours of excavating, you know. It still had a little bit more level to go, but that's really nice about groundwater wetlands that you do with these when you're just excavating out, because it's almost instant. You can see what you have. Yep.
Question on that, you talked before about breaking the seal of a natural one. So
Yep.
how do you know how much to dig out?
Because I did soil samples.
Yeah.
Okay. This is that's a tidal wetland. It's got a saline plug underneath of salt water pushing that up, and I knew that there was no hard pan or anything under that. It was peat, a little bit of sandy loam, and then sand. So actually those levels actually would have naturally varied with tides, but because they got a pump station there, the levels stay stable because they pump to a certain level to maintain across the ditch the dairy farms there. So we did have a little bit of management of those things. This is a really cool one that the farmer went and talked to me about. The best thing to do when you to destroy the landscape or destroy a wetland is just put stock in it and just let them in there for years, and they can flatten land out and take out the topography really quickly, especially bulls and that kind of thing. This wetland, this is what I had when I showed there. This was in the winter time, and we looked at it, it's like, well, yep, there was no place to put in any groundwater dams to lift the water up, but it was really cool. We had Kaikateas. Kaikateas are very sensitive to water change, more up than down. So the one thing we didn't want to do is lift the water level up and kill our Kaikateas, okay? But you could go into the Kaikateas and really cool. I could see where the historic ground level was on those. You can see where, so we knew that that this has been dropped significantly, mainly because of the stream there. Next one. But we had water right next to the surface. So basically we excavated. The issue was, where do we do with all that soil? This was 2.4 hectares. Oh, by the way, the wetland we did before this one, the Kaituna wetland, was about $5,000. This one here was about $7 grand. It's like, what do we do with the soils? Well, I knew from these cockatias when I was looking where the soil levels used to be. And so basically we just pulled soil out and spread it around those cockatias to protect them a little bit more from the water and go from there.
Doesn't
And
that Pugged and all the wetland,
what's this?
two slides back,
Yep.
doesn't that to me a perfect wetland, fence it off in front of it, it's already there.
Yeah, the hydrology was changed a little bit, and it was flattened, because historically it would have had some pooling and ponds, and so that's what we're trying to do is try to get some of that biodiversity instead of, we could have did it and it would have filled up with rushes and that kind of thing. Again, the landowner wanted a little bit of habitat for biodiversity.
You want to open water on that. Yeah.
Well, he wanted open water, but he wanted crakes, he wanted bittern, and he wanted ducks. It's not hunted, but he wanted that biodiversity to it. It wasn't considered a wetland by the regional council standards, which was quite nice, even though technically it was a wetland.
But
So
ideally, you could just fix it off.
you could, yep, yeah. It was being drained a little bit by the stream because the stream was in size way down below. But yeah, you could have planted that up and just left it grow up in rushes and stuff. Although it would take a while for it because of all the exotic grass in it. And so, but we didn't excavate. The max we excavated was that deep. You know.
And if you hadn't excavated, could you have just put piles of topsoil like higgledy round?
Yep. And we did that in some of it in next time. You can see, it'll look like, when you do wetland restoration, it looks like a bomb site as we go through. But you can see we're not going that far deep. We're just basically taking a little bit of topsoil off. In fact, we didn't even have to spread topsoil on. And it was pissing down rain, so really the topsoil was all wet anyway. So we just made sure we could maintain a layer of topsoil on a lot of it. Except for,
Didn't go down the play.
no, we didn't have any clay there. Actually, we had, if you went down, we could because of the stream stuff, but if you went down, we ended up with that gray layer that looked like clay. But when you picked it up, and it was sand, it was a sandy clay. So it was just spring fed. But we did, you can see right there and here, and there was another spot over here. We did scrape down to that sandy layer because we wanted some shorebird foraging habitat for this one. And that's what it looked like a couple months after it was done. You know, these, no vegetation is as established in here yet, but, or it has now, but yeah, most of these ponds here will be rushes, for the most part. We've got Raupo over here, but, we tried to avoid, connecting the Raupo to some of those open areas, because Raupo can get fairly invasive and reduce your diversity. So we wanted to keep Raupo in one place. So what I did is we dug a trench a meter below the Raupo, right in front of the Raupo where we didn't want the Raupo to spread to. And what happens a lot of times is the Raupo will grow, it drops down into that trench, but it won't climb back up. Because we wanted to keep the Raupo there, but we didn't want 100% Raupo across the whole wetland.
But it's a groundwater wetland.
This is groundwater. Yep, this water's right at the surface. Yep.
But if you want bittern and mushcrake, etc., their prime habitat is that edge of the Raupo.
The Raupo,
So
but
if you get
this-
deep near the edge, then they haven't got that ability to wade around there. So
well, they'll wade through the Raupo. Yep. But they'll just pop over. They just pop over the trench. They just jump over. But this will all be rushed. Some of this stuff here, will all be rushland, which they'll use too. It'll be thick brushes, usually Kuda or those kind of things. So, yeah. Raupo is one of those controversial ones with a lot of farmers. So it was one of those. I don't mind it. If half that was in Raupo, I would have been happy. But the farmer didn't want it. When you're dealing with landowners, it's a balance between
sure.
Those kind of things. And yeah, so really, there's no hard edges, no steep edges. It just, you walk across it. This is all still wet. You can see we've got mounds here, through there that hopefully will be planning on planting more cacotillas in those mounds. I haven't had a lot of success planting cacotillas in the water, even though they grow in water. So I've been putting those mounds. The other thing we put on those mounds is Carixectas. Grow Carixectas. Oh, yep, the good one. We'll go through this one really quick. Blasting. This one really is a hard one to get consent to do, but to get groundwater. It's quite fun. So you gotta get somebody with a license to help you. You lay out a grid, next slide. And you place the explosives. You can do this in usually you auger a hole and then you put the explosive in and you fill that hole up with dirt. Because the groundwater was right at the surface, we didn't have to fill it up with dirt because the groundwater held that. Tom's probably done a few of these. We place the explosives in the auger hole. This guy's the boss. Well, I said, digger operators are, what they're doing. If this guy says run, I run. If he says anything, do this, do that, you listen to him. When you're handling these, we were using anti-tank explosives that were that he needed to destroy. So they're surplus to demand from the Army that he had a contract to destroy. So why not use them for good? Yep. Detonation cord, but you can see the water surface right at the surface. So we didn't have to plug those holes. We laid it out in the grid, and you can only do small ones with this, and you got to do them right because sometimes you can blast it up and it'll go up and then come right back down. It's nice to have a little bit of a wind to blow it. This is on peak. Health and safety. This is like #1 critical when you're dealing with explosives is that anybody involved, if you're not handling the explosives and not helping the explosives, you are way away and you listen to everybody. This is like, it's just one of those that you just, health and safety, you just can't say, oh yeah, health and safety, this is critical. And then you just blast it. It creates a nice little thing. This is on peak, so like the whole ground, even the dairy farms across the way did. And that's what you end up with. Again, it's rough sides, it's really steep sides, but actually because the explosion that's loose, and what happens is they actually settle in and actually create more a sloping side naturally because it's loose, it's not pulled by a digger and then compacted at all. So it looks rough at first, and but it creates a whole lot of different topography. Next one. And then there's filling with groundwater. And then if you hit.
Nathan, when would you choose the blast rather than dig?
When you can't get a digger in there. We could get a digger in here, so we used the digger to punch the holes in with post. I got to push the button, so that made me happy.
So you put the digger in, but you still chose the blast?
Yes, because we were doing this as a training exercise. Usually it's one of those areas where we just need to get a digger or anything else, and